I wrote this about 6 months ago, and then right after I wrote it, I read a book by a gentleman named Greg Braden, and in his book he said that he noticed that he was doing a genetic study, and he said, you know, the heart, there's brain cells the resonance of the brain cells, there's 20% of them that are in your heart, brain cells. And I went, oh, that's interesting. And then I immediately thought of my wife, because we'll be thinking about something and she'll come up with an answer. And she has, as far as I'm concerned, she has no criteria for having the answer. She hasn't looked at the research, all that kind of stuff. But 80% of the time it was right, which annoyed me to no end.
Only somebody that's been married a long time understands.
42 years, yeah, there you go. So I thought about that, and I taught postgraduate studies for chiropractors for 10 years. 8 of them was at Life Chiropractic College. And when I taught those classes, they were jam-packed with information and data. I didn't miss anything. Now, the unfortunate part is I also recognize they were probably pretty darn boring. So I'm doing things a little different today. What I'd like to do, I guess corny as it sounds, is kind of speak from my heart, because chiropractic has been a large part of my life. And I'm sorry, they tell me this is a strength. I don't particularly think it is. But anyhow, I wanted to share with you what my experience has been going through chiropractic for this time, and my consideration of the evolution of how I think. And I'm hoping that actually by what you see, what I've actually experienced, you can actually put it to your own experience and be able to come up with some conclusions in relationship to the utilization of chiropractic in the art of healing. And now it's a little bit confusing, even for me, about what really a paradigm is for chiropractors. So what I did was I put together some of the techniques, and chiropractic is pretty technique intensive. So hopefully this will help. Okay? So here we'll get started here. My youngest daughter is a attorney. And I promised her that I always put a disclaimer in everything that I write. She wrote the disclaimer. I left it up there long enough so I can say that, Lindsay, I did it. Okay? So what we talked about before is chiropractic is a many different concepts, many different styles. And when I started in school, what they actually taught me. And what actually was very difficult for new chiropractors is they tried to squeeze the patient into the technique. And after 40 years, you realize that you squeeze the technique into the patient. So that makes you much more forced to be very eclectic at what you do. So the first thing I was told, almost the first day, the nervous system holds the key to the body's incredible potential to heal itself. And that was the basis. If you wanted people to heal, you unimpinged their nervous system. And that was it. That's what you were told. And then they gave you a picture of a spinal cord, told you there were nerves that come out each side of it. And the major premise, and this really still holds extremely valid for me today, because there's many aspects of it that I still think are remarkable, that we treat causes, not symptoms, okay? And that the body is a self-healing organism. And I think that gets missed with a lot of healing arts, the recognition that the incredible power of the body to heal itself. It's just amazing to me. Also, we talked a lot about symptoms. And, you know, they're the first thing to come and the last thing to go away. Yeah, something like that. And the health of the human nervous system is directly proportional to the health of the spine. Now, this is what we were taught, okay? These are chiropractic premises that go back, really, D.D. Palmer in 1850 or something adjusted Harvey Lillard. This is what we were taught. And there's some discrepancies about where they adjusted him. People that believed in the whole spine said they adjusted him at T12, and he did, and he got his hearing back. Other people said they adjusted his atlas, or the top bone in his neck. I think you get the point, though. So the whole concept is chiropractic designed to make you, not to make you feel good, but to make you heal good, okay? So I'm just trying to give you like the bottom line rock core, what you start out with in chiropractic schools. Then after about 6 years in practice, I met a gentleman. He said, you know, the only reason we have organs is because we want the expression of the nervous system to have some place to animate it. Now, that was as intense as I've ever heard in relationship to how important they feel the spine is. But if you look at embryological studies, that's how it happens. You get the nerve, and then you get the organs actually coming out there. So it gives you more of an appreciation for how significant it actually is. Then just for fun, I wanted to see what exposure initially to chiropractic would be to the individual. And we're looking at less hospital stays significant. And the most significant is 85% less cost in pharmaceuticals. So I think, you know, right there, they're my friends, you know. Then we talked about recently, just about opioid addiction. I'm sure you're hearing all kinds of stuff. I had the opportunity to work with a rehabilitation center here in Atlanta. And what they recognized as they were working with these people, they recognized that they had to do something for their body because they were so decimated that they really couldn't think straight. Okay? And so they used to come to see me. And it was quite an education for me because at least 60 to 70% of these people had some type of musculoskeletal problem, severe, and they actually went down the oxycodone path. Then they abused them to the point they couldn't get them anymore, and then they went on heroin. And they came to see me because, one, they were trying to get their bodies back, but the other thing, they were trying to get rid of what they should have gotten rid of a whole lot longer before. Okay? Now, this is an interesting one I liked a lot. It said, you know, where you go first. Your initial point of contact is you get 42%, and a medical doctor to get surgery. With chiropractors, they get 1.5%. I see that in my practice, thank God, you know. This is something called the Marc chart, and what it actually does, it relates organs to nerves. Okay? So what you're told is you adjust, it depends who you ask, C4 or C7, and that turns the power back on to the thyroid, and then the thyroid will work again. So that's how you're trained. And the concept is if the person isn't getting better, they just haven't been adjusted enough. Okay? So I'm trying to give you an initial orientation to what my initial orientation was. And then the subluxation is actually the entity that you're actually trying to get rid of. Okay? And it's a vertebra moved out of place, putting pressure on the nerve and causing disease or dysfunction to the particular part of the body where it goes. Okay? It's relatively straightforward and simple. Now, the first area of potential controversy is the use of X-ray as far as chiropractors are concerned. Now, some doctors will actually use an X-ray as a diagnostic tool. Some of them, and this includes myself, if I'm going to be adjusting your spine, I want to see what it looks like. If there's pieces missing, if there's difficulties with it, you want me to have that. Now, multiple sources times of X-rays, we can talk about that a little bit later. The benefit of X-ray now is with digital X-rays, you got 1/20th the amount of radiation, and that's huge. Okay, but as far as I'm concerned, from a person going to a chiropractor with some type of difficulty, especially if it's traumatic, he must have an X-ray for his own health. And if you look at it yourself, I mean, if you've all been adjusted before, you understand the thrust and force that gets put into the back. And if in fact, and I'm sure you've heard it, that there's potential harm that can be caused from being adjusted, this is one of the ways out of it. Okay, so that might be something that'll help you. these are x-rays. You can see the difference. On the left side, they are digital x-rays. I just had to add the hardware. Sorry, I can't help myself. And then on the right side, they're conventional x-rays, okay? So you can see the difference. I'll tell you a story. This is somewhat embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Of all the skills one needs to have to be a chiropractor, I felt it in myself. Radiological interpretation was my weakest subject. And it bothered me, and I really put a lot of time into it. A close friend of mine got a digital x-ray unit, and I went over to his office, and he proudly had him sitting up in his room, and I looked at him, and I started laughing. And he goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I just recognized I don't have a problem reading x-rays. I have a problem reading crappy x-rays." Because if you look at this one on the right, that's somewhat characteristic of what you'd see. And I just didn't know how anybody saw it. Anyway, I feel better now, thank you. So the main intention, the philosophical points, is that there is innate intelligence that actually happens from the brain. And you have nerves that go down into your body, you take the pressure off, and then the innate intelligence will be expressed. So that philosophy is pretty flawless. But as we go through this, I will tell you what my experience was with this particular concept, and what really forced me to actually look at it a little closer. So in relationship to the correlation between systems, glands, and organs, I think that's pretty self-evident. The concept was, if you can't feel, you can't heal. So the whole concept of a neurological interpretation of systems, glands, and organs, from what I know now, it's all light, okay? And that's what the communication actually is. But you can see the concept is readily understood. Now I'm going to start going through some of the specific chiropractic techniques. And I'm going to use the ones that I'm most familiar with, so I feel comfortable talking about them. But there are a whole lot more. Okay? CBP, or chiropractic biophysics, actually looks at the spine, and they look at it from its position. And they say that if the spine is out of position, it's going to cause neural interference. And they don't do things based on C4 is out of place. They actually believe that that's not a possible concept, that you really can't know that. And what they do is something called global adjusting, which would mean his head's bent forward. Let's put his neck into a proper position. Now, if you look at x-rays of people, you don't have to know anything, but you can look at them and almost cringe. And recognize the fact there is a benefit to having correct spinal posture, because a lot of problems that will occur, including neurological ones, will be predisposed to this. Pain would be another one. Big one. Now, I don't know if you know this one, but SOT is an old technique. It's the first one I know of that actually decided is to stop just adjusting spines, but adjust organs, extremities, and even the pelvis. Okay? Now, there is a nutritional component to it. There is an autonomic system component, sacro-occipital being parasympathetic, which in this world, I think we need a lot more of. Okay? So it's a very detailed, it's very extensive to learn. I've learned some of it over time, but I didn't want to spend all my effort in doing one thing. So if you've ever seen anybody have blocks on their back, you know, they put them underneath their pelvis, that's an SOT technique, or that's where it originally started from. It's very effective for low backs, too. Motion palpation, that's a fancy name of saying how it moves. Okay, so you see the goniometer there, they say how the symmetry is really what they're looking at. So when they examine you, they'd go, well, you can move 40 degrees this way and 30 degrees this way. So we'll know that the subluxation exists so we can get increased amount of motion into that spine. So you can see right away, only from 3 particular points of view, that we're looking at pretty different philosophies here. So if it gets confusing. Now, a very early technique, you can see with the instrument on the left, that's called a neurocalligraph, and basically it picks up heat. The concept being that if there's more heat on one side than there is on another side, you've got muscle spasm and inflammation. And then the supposition becomes that that's where the subluxation is. More advanced work, where they deal with surface EMG, they can just see the conductivity of the skin. And that's the time and the place where they feel it needs to be adjusted. Now let's go totally opposite of what we just talked about so far. There are doctors or chiropractors who are just strictly interested in rehabilitation. People that are in whiplash injuries. You know, they tear up the ligaments in their neck, or the disc, or the nerve, etc. And that has to be restabilized. Now you can see that adjusting people would be part of this, but so would be some type of physical therapy, some kind of exercise. Okay? So it's looking at it from a totally different point of view. Now, this is where it got interesting for me. When I went to school, the way that I was taught is you never used nutrition because you never needed it. And actually, it was another practice other than chiropractic that would actually use nutrition. So it was, from what I was taught, it was disdained upon. Okay? My own experience has been that what I know about applied kinesiology, which is not as much as it actually is, but what's practical for me is the relationship between a muscle, a nerve, and an organ. Where the concept is if you check the strength of a muscle, you can relate that muscle to a specific organ. And the concept is if the organ is weak, the muscle will lose its energy because it's much more important for me to breathe than it is for my deltoid to work. So if the deltoid goes down, you strengthen up the lungs and the muscle gets stronger. This is has a tremendous amount of utility. I find it best with athletes because when someone comes in and they've been athletic all their life and their hamstring is weak, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Does that make sense? I had a young person. He was a freshman in college, UGA, and he injured his hamstring, and he was playing varsity ball as a freshman. He's shortstop, I think, and it ruined his career. He couldn't do it anymore. Well, he got really upset, and he decided to party a lot, which seems to be UGA's thing. And he ended up with mono. So his mom brought him in to see me because of the mono. And as I got to know him a little bit better, we recognized that he was having difficulty with his hamstring, and that's related to the intestines. And I asked him, I said, "Do you poop?" He said, "Maybe once a week." So we solved two problems for him. We got his hamstring back, because it took some while for the mono to get better. But anyway, that's just an example of what I've seen. And there is a lot more to this, that if someone was actually an expert at AK, and there's CK, clinical kinesiology. I was fortunate enough to know a gentleman who practiced for 56 years, and he knew George Goodhart, which is the guy who started this. I learned a lot. This is where I started when I started adjusting. It's called upper cervical. Basically, that's an instrument behind you. I think it might be a Pedibond instrument if you ever heard of that. It's a stylus that adjusts your neck. Okay. Now that's the relationship of the atlas and axis, the two top bones in your neck, and your brainstem goes down through those. That's the concept behind hanging people, just so you know. See the little bumpy thing that's sitting out there called the odontoid? Okay? A good hangman will be able to take the neck in a certain way, so he shoves the odontoid right into the brainstem and kills you right away. If he doesn't like you, he won't do that. Do you understand? So anyway, what the relationship is between the atlas axis and above it is called the occiput. You want to get those in balance, and there's a pretty interesting way, physics way, of actually getting them in balance, and the intention is to get the pressure off the brainstem. And the concept is, if you shut the power off here, it's not going anyplace else. Now, my problem with this technique is that back in 1980, you had to use a lot of x-ray. You did pre and post x-ray each time you would adjust somebody. And one of the x-rays is called, you shoot up this way, right through the vertex here, which the optic chiasm goes through. And if you got optic, it's where the brain, where the eyes see with. I couldn't do that too long. So about 6 or 8 months I did that technique. Amazing results, but that was the problem I had. I'd have less problems now because it's 1/20th of the x-ray. But it's valuable. It's hard to actually get the patient to recognize, my foot's hurting. What the heck are you doing adjusting my neck? But that nonetheless, it seems to have some effect. Now, I kind of like children a lot. So I've taken a pretty good amount of time to learn how to adjust pregnant women. I was fortunate enough to go to school when a teacher named Larry Webster was teaching the Webster technique at our school. And what his claim to fame was, besides making it easier to be pregnant, was to flip children. Where there were vertex presentation, he said he had between an 85 and 90 success rate of flipping them. And the brilliance in what he actually did is he noticed that the sacrum, which is that bone on the bottom there, and basically it had ligaments that went onto the uterus. They're called the round ligament. And he actually developed a technique where you could adjust the sacrum, take the pressure or the irritation of the ligament off of the uterus, which was actually twisting it. So from a neurological standpoint, it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And apparently, that caused the child to have more predisposition to flip. So if you're dealing with any pregnant women, I highly recommend they find someone that's versed in doing Webster technique. It's incomparable. Also, my experience with doing it is the average time in labor is between 4 and 6 hours. So, you just make it so that the pelvis has the opportunity to open up. Okay? And I just love that picture, so I put it there. So this is where, when in the 9th year of practicing, this is when I start looking at, well, maybe there's other things to do. And this is the reason why. I practiced in Pennsylvania in 1980. And right near 3 Mile Island, actually, which was kind of interesting. It just had the nuclear spill. But we saw things happening from adjusting people that were absolutely amazing. And I'm not telling you this to ingratiate myself. I'm just telling you from an experience standpoint. I worked with the doctor, and I was as an intern, okay? And the concept of what's called a straight chiropractor is to see how many people you can see, okay? And this may be unbelievable, but it'll get more. I would regularly see in that style of practice well over 100 people every day, okay? And I did that for years, okay? Now, if you have considerations about that style of practice, I probably heard them and probably voiced them myself. But the bottom line of it was, I learned at that particular time, it wasn't how much time I spent with people, it's what I did when I was there. So that said, I had a gentleman who was blind who came to see me because he fell and he hurt his neck. He injured his neck when he was a child, I don't remember how, but he lost his vision. So he was coming to see me, and his brother used to take him every week for a long time. And I walk in the room one time, and he's sitting there, and he's reading the newspaper. And it took me a little while to get the idea that the person who was reading the newspaper had been blind the last time I saw him. And the look on his face was so precious, So I saw that. A little boy named Patrick, he was deaf. He had chronic ear infections when he was very young, 6 months to 3 years, and he lost his hearing. So he came to see me. Now, this is when I was just adjusting people, okay? And his mom called me and said, Doc, I wanted you to know Patrick just called me. And it didn't register right then. She said he was upset because all the other children in the class were making so much noise. So anyway, I saw these things, and then as I started to practice longer and longer, I didn't think I was as good as I was before because I wasn't getting these miracles to occur. And I said, what's wrong with me? So fortunately, and I looked at the statistics there were on, and how people were getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And I'm going, what the heck is going on here, you know? So it led to my first experience going outside the box. 9 years into practice, I was very ill. I ended up in the hospital and I had 9 hours of brain surgery. When I came out of the hospital, my daily day was 1 hour up, I ate something and slept 23 hours a day. So I was traumatized. Okay? Brain surgery back in 1989 was not wonderful, okay? Kept me alive, but the point is that I went to every chiropractor I could think of, every technique I could think of. And I got some results, but not anything what I needed to. I found a friend of mine told me about a doctor down in West Palm Beach. And he was a chiropractor, but he was integrating standard process nutrition with what he was doing. And I went to see him, and this is like far out of my box. He was using muscle testing. He was doing a seminar, so he had me up on stage, which was like unbelievable to me. And long and short of it, within 2 weeks, I was appreciably better. And within a month, I went back to practice. And 6 months, I was pretty okay. But I had a problem, and that was, now what do I do? Am I going to go back and practice the way I did, knowing what I know now? So I didn't do that. And I literally followed him everywhere in the country to learn the technique. And within 2 years, I was teaching his workshops. But the point is, at that point in time, I recognized that maybe what I learned wasn't everything that I needed to know. Okay? And I got to the point where I consider it evolutionary. Okay? Because what I actually wanted to accomplish was I wanted people to be self-healing organisms. I didn't want them to have anything wrong with them. I felt they had a right, they had a right to be normal, to be healthy, to not have any pain whatsoever. And that's all kind of a lofty goal. Now I recognized that when I started to implement nutrition into my practice changed some. The patients that I was experiencing were much more interested in their health. When I just strictly would adjust people, I was more like an aspirin. It hurts here, it hurts here, it hurts here. And I felt that their education was lacking. And it fell perfectly into the medical paradigm, because that's what you do, is like when you hurt, you do something. Well, heck, it was a lot better than taking oxycodone, no question. But it didn't follow what I considered was the expectation that they really needed to have about their health. So I changed my paradigm to people have to take charge of their health. So I made it so that my care to them would actually facilitate that occurring. Because secretly, I'll tell you this, but I wanted them to recognize the insanity they were experiencing about their health. I wanted them to be able to go into the endocrinologist who just got the blood work back, and he said, well, I think you have Graves' disease, we need to remove your thyroid. I would like to say, I'd like him to stand up, slam on the desk and say, what are you, crazy? Okay? And I think that understanding would actually create a profound change in our healthcare. So I really dedicated the rest of my career to educating patients. And I reversed it there. The Eastern philosophy became extremely huge to me. And their simplicity was profoundly respectful to me. I thought it was stupid, to be real honest. But you know, if you boil it down from an Eastern standpoint, their basic foundational principle is you can't be sick and healthy simultaneously. Yeah, sure, that's true. But you know, it's so if you do things that are healthful, there's less chance of you being sick. But it's going to take time for the health to overcome the sickness. And I bounce that back and forth between them all the time. So now my concept of chiropractic became complementary. Because look, there's sometimes when people come in to see you that you do everything nutritionally to them and it just doesn't work. So you realize there's a neurological component, like the nerve just not working. It's not talking. And that's fortunate. I've seen benefits occur from that, tremendous benefits. Now, these are a list of all the things that I know that chiropractors do besides just adjust. And it makes it very confusing to be able to determine what exactly you get when you go to a chiro. And I think it would be important for you to know what you're actually trying to accomplish. Okay? And from a standpoint of evolution, there are many chiropractors that are actually going down the same path that I have. And it's not an easy one. I don't mean to be melodramatic, but you don't really know what to look at. I mean, I came across the Quest instrument because I saw it in somebody's office, because I wanted to get care for myself. So the first two techniques I worked with are CRA and NRT. CRA is contact reflex analysis. It's a combination of chiropractic, muscle testing, and nutrition. And NRT, as far as I was concerned, was an advancement, which means nutritional response testing. And it included something I consider to be extremely vital, which is the autonomic nervous system. Okay? So that was huge. Now here was the problem. So I can adjust the C7 till it freezes over, but if the thyroid's dead, nothing's going to happen. Is that true? Scared me. I said I couldn't talk 50 minutes already, you know? Okay, can you tell me how much I have?
You have 15 months.
Thank you. Okay, so it looked like we needed to start working on how to get it so that the organ actually was functional. That's where you guys come in, right? I personally think there could be a great complement, and we'll talk about that more. So the whole concept became, can a visceral complication cause a subluxation? Does that make sense? So I looked at the nervous system, and there's something called an afferent nerve. That's coming from the tissue going into the spine and saying ouch a lot. Well, the body will not allow itself to have that much interference. So it'll literally take the vertebra and shut it off. I have virtually experienced adjusting somebody with an ulcer and the vertebra kicking right back out again. I said, well, that's cool. They didn't think so, but I did. Sorry. So I've known Renee for 4 years, I guess. And I tease her about her accent. I'm just politically incorrect. But the Southern analogies are wonderful. I don't understand most of them. But this one I made myself, you know, because a lot of times it doesn't have to be where the pain is, right? Thank you. Good, I'm glad somebody laughed. I was worried, man. I go, oh, God. It's such a politically correct environment, you know, I don't know what to say. But you can have thoracic pain, especially fourth or fifth, especially on the right side, and it can be gallbladder related, right? And you can have low back pain that's prostate or back pain. Where classically, what I would do is I'd look at their x-ray, see that the L5 was tilted, and I'd adjust them, and I'd keep adjusting them. And my rationale was like, well, just haven't adjusted you enough yet. And I'm not bashing anybody from doing this. I've just said this is the thought process that I went through. Okay? And whatever. And you can look at all these referred, the bladder, the sacrum, the prostate. The prostate controls calcium as well. So you can have back pain just from sheer inability to produce the hormones necessary for calcium. So how do we know that a vertebra will remain in place once it's been adjusted? What causes the subluxation to occur? And that's what we're talking about, right? So it's I'll tell you from a practical standpoint, I went from adjusting people 3 times a week for a very long time to rarely adjusting people more than once a week, and noticing that the stability of the spine was, profoundly enhanced because I saw it in front of me, and I saw it with the people that I was adjusting 3 times a week, and they came over to what I was doing, and I saw that result. I went, I'm onto something here. My own personal experience has been headaches. That's why I became a chiropractor. I was teaching chemistry, and one of the kids in my class was taking the class to go to chiropractic school. He was an Olympic wrestler. It helped him a lot in his career, so he wanted to go back. Well, I start missing classes because I get headaches, and he was flunking classes because I wasn't there. He was not a happy guy. So finally, I told him what was wrong, and he says, you need to come see my chiropractor. And I said, you're out of your mind, right? So finally almost forced me. So I went to see the guy, and I said, listen, I don't really believe in you. I don't think you can do anything to help me, but I'm here. And he goes, and I go, you adjust my neck and the headaches go away, I'll be back. And he said, it doesn't happen that way. And I said, I knew that you guys would like that, I'll leave. So 3 months later, I came back, I said to him, I don't care if you cut my head off, just do something to fix it. And he did. So there was another problem that I had. I had to do something about it, which is I was just about to graduate with a degree in microbiology, so I knew I was going to go back to school, right? So I figured I'd go there as well. So that's where it started from. We have another concept here, which is if the nerve is hungry, it hurts. Okay, and B vitamins and sugar. I could talk about sugar for the rest of the time I have to talk. But anyway, you can severely affect the nerve from a kind of a neuropathy type thing, but you can have starving nerve. So look, you put a butter knife in a wall socket, right? It kicks off the circuit breaker. If you don't take the butter knife out and you try to keep kicking the circuit breaker back on, it doesn't work. Okay? And getting them to stop eating sugar sometimes, amazing. So I also wrote down this particular thought process. Is like when you have these particular nutrients that you have to get into your body, there's processes that they have to go through. They have to be absorbed. They have to go into the blood. They have to get into bone. And every one of those particular steps takes a very specific nutrition. Okay? Now we're going to talk about what I think, this was really a kicker for me. I read this. It said energy is everything. And that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, it's physics. I love that. Now, 2 days after I read that, I ended up in that doctor's office that had a Quest machine. I said, that's what this is talking about. So it really kind of revolutionized how I practice. I incorporate it into my practice. This is what I do. As I go along, I just keep incorporating. And what I use the Quest machine for is like a second opinion. Because sometimes when I go on the scan for nutrition, it'll come up with what would this have anything to do with what I think it should do? And it's because it's energetic. So it was actually learning, and it's great. My staff, when I showed it to them, thought I was a little nuts. And then one of my girls, one of the ladies that worked for me said, oh, you mean that's like you on steroids? I said, kinda, because if I check 10 or 15 reflexes on a body. In the same amount of time, that thing will check 300 reflexes and give me a quantitative evaluative dilution. So it was wonderful. And concepts like dehydration causing back pain, I never thought that. I did after the Quest machine. Cell phones, that unheard of. Now, I added this section in here because of the fact that this is where I really think, excuse me, you guys, is it y'all down here? Yeah. Yeah. How come we didn't put a plural on the second? Anyway. Somebody comes into me with that type of a neck, I can't adjust them. I'm going to injure them, right? That's a nutritional deficiency, right? So somebody better do something about that before I can't work on them. I won't like it. So it forces me to actually do something. So I added a case history here. This is Clive. I love Clive. But when he came to see me, I was kind of in an evolutionary state, like not adjusting this guy only is going to do it. That's his back, okay? So they have a wonderful disease. They call this idiopathic spondylitis. Now we have an acronym for it. We call it DISH, which is diffused idiopathic spinal hyperostosis. Are you impressed? Doesn't mean a damn thing, and it sure doesn't do anything to fix them. The orthopedic approach was, well, choose what you want to do. You want to sit or stand? That's what the choice they gave him. So you would think here that she is holding his neck there, right? No, she's just making it so there's not much pain. He can't go any further than that. Okay? Now, after 4 years, we got his head down to there. Some nutrition, a homeopathic or a remedy all the time. But it can happen. So the combination of two disciplines is really vital. And I'm really kind of trying to get you, like, why these guys need you. All right? If someone chooses to practice chiropractic, and more power to them. I taught a class for 8 years. It was called The Benefit of Nutrition in a Subluxation-Based Practice. Now, the major resistance that I experienced was, Doc, it's just too much to know. Okay? So that's where you fit in. So that's where the complementary part is. And I really mean that. It's going to take some communication, right? But everybody can win at this game, I promise. And another one of those. That's a Harrington rod, believe it or not. If you're 13 years old, you can have one of those. I've seen children, after that surgery with lots of morphine, screaming. There's osteoporosis. Well, I'm not doing anything with that. That's why you need an x-ray, guys, because you can't see those sometimes, right? Degenerative changes. There's my favorite over here to the next one. This is, I have no idea what this is. Doesn't that look like it hurts? I can't imagine that after you do that, the person wouldn't hurt. I can't imagine how you could make it so it wasn't inflamed. I also can't imagine that you could do anything to fix it. And sometimes they remove them. What the heck is that going to do? Make it worse? Knees are the same way, right? I mean, you can adjust those for a long time, guys. Okay. So these are the statistics. 600,000 knee replacements a year. And my favorite here, 4.7 million with an artificial knee by 2050 or 60. I figured this out. It's $209 billion. I also figured out I could take care of the city of Roswell for 20 years for that. It's amazing. It's prevalent. Oh my God, really prevalent. You can see the statistic going up. Okay? So that's complementary. It's not going to happen from getting adjusted all the time, that you're going to make that go away. It'll help, but you certainly need some nutrition. Okay? And that's basically the rationale. Can't have tissue unless it's fed. That's what that says. Now, this is my favorite picture. I love this picture here. Because There is an elephant in the room. You know it. It's hard to take care of people. We got a lot to deal with. It's ridiculous. You know, the amount well, you have to make sure you say it this way, right? You know, look, I'm going to tell you, it's easy for me. Well, it's easy because of the fact I took my ego and threw it out the window. I'm not healing your Lyme's disease. Yeah, I mean, I could go to jail. I'd love that, you know. But the bottom line is I'm in a position where I can diagnose some things and I can't diagnose others, right? But the bottom line is I don't diagnose anything. If you look at my consultation forms, they say sick, you know, because where are they going to go with that? And look, if you keep it like we're just healing your body, it's a natural organism, it heals. You can fix it, it heals. So if we can get as many people on the same page and do what we do, we can all be a happy, live together kind of thing. It's just that, at least in my experience, well, I do it this way. And for some reason, that's more right. One of the things what a concept it is coming here. I mean, I'm wearing a stone on my wrist because I'm doing a new technique that generates a tremendous amount of energy coming off the patient. I don't like it, you know, so I'd never wear one of these things, you know, but I'm desperate. So Kelly said, you know, try one of these things. So they're going to put it around my office and all kinds of cool stuff. But anyway, so you tremendously teach me a lot. When I start working with the Quest machine, Renee would say to me, I don't know you're going to like this, Mark. And she said she talked to Carol about it, and she said, let him deal with it. He'll be okay. So we should create our own complementary medicine. I think that we have enough to deal with the people that are totally antagonistic to us, that we need to be antagonistic to each other. You know, I don't know what the solution is, kids. I really don't. But there needs to be one, and we'll be much stronger. Sorry. That's my first grandchild. That was the first time I saw him. He lives in Portland. But I looked at his eyes, and I looked at his skin color, and from a doctor standpoint, that's perfect. You know? And what came to my mind, my wife took exemplary care of herself when she had his mom, and my daughter Sarah took exemplary care of herself, and that's what the kid looks like. We can create a new universe. So there we go. So that says people are supposed to be like candles. They burn bright the whole time and flicker out at the end. We're not, however, heroic medicine the last year of our life where we spend 90% of the money on our health in the last year and we end up in pieces and die. I've seen people that have been through procedures and they're not alive. They're just walking around. It's disgusting. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear what I have to say.